Hi, let's talk about Worksheet 2 of Ecology chapter. Worksheet 2 is slightly more challenging than 1 because Worksheet 2 contains 2 questions that are free response question, okay, your FRQs. And yeah, let me talk about them, okay? So for the first question, you will see the carbon cycle of a picture that you have to figure out what it means, but actually it's not so important because the question actually says, okay, explain how photosynthesis, respiration, and animal nutrition are involved in the carbon cycle. This is the question. It is 6 marks. And for this carbon cycle that is shown in figure 1, right, you only need to talk about respiration, photosynthesis, and animal nutrition because that's what the question says. There is no need to talk about combustion. There is no need to talk about decomposition. There is no need to talk about other stuff. So many of you, right, in your answers, you talk about so many other stuff is because you're not addressing the question. So just fix this 3, okay? And because it is 6 marks, right, you have to start thinking, right, of how the mark allocation will be like. It is not 100%, but it is a good strategy, okay, instead of writing so much. But I can see that many of you, right, are actually trying to write as specific as possible. So actually it's a good start. But for the rest of you who are writing non-stop, I think you need to be more concise in your writing, okay? Since this is a 6-mark question, I would think that 2 marks is allocated for photosynthesis, 2 marks for respiration, and 2 marks for animal nutrition. Okay, so yeah, I guess that's it. So the second thing that I want to talk about, right, for this question is not to use the word carbon dioxide so much because the carbon dioxide is just one small component in the whole carbon cycle. So a lot of you just keep talking about carbon dioxide, carbon dioxide, carbon dioxide. Okay? You must talk about the carbon in carbon dioxide. So please be careful when you write this. Okay? This is the suggested answer. Okay, you can see that I try to make it I try to really split it up into something that is not so flowy. Okay, because FRQs to me doesn't have to be flowy. All right, for photosynthesis, right, I have to include the process, and this is something that I want you to remember. Okay, and carbon dioxide is absorbed. Okay, so this one is quite standard. But then the next line, right, you can see that the carbon in the carbon dioxide. So I don't want to talk about carbon dioxide anymore. I want to focus on carbon. So carbon, right, in photosynthesis is used to form glucose and starch. Okay, it can also be converted to other forms such as proteins and fats. So yes, carbon is locked into the plants through photosynthesis, but you can elaborate it into 2 or 3 points. Okay, so these are my suggested answer. For photosynthesis, right, I have given you 3 points, in fact. And I think this 3 points is good enough. For animal nutrition, right, which most of you write correctly, so when animals feed on plants, the carbon is transferred. Okay, so it's no more carbon dioxide. Please don't keep writing carbon dioxide. The carbon is transferred. And when it is transferred, right, this is the same idea as the one that I talked about just now. This is 2 are the same. The carbon, right, that you feed on is converted, remember assimilation, okay, and it is stored in other forms. And you can give examples again. These 2 are the same, but you can repeat them, it's perfectly fine. Okay, and finally respiration. Now when you talk about respiration, right, you must mention that the glucose is broken down because glucose is C6H12O6. And I'm interested again in the carbon. I don't care about the hydrogen and the oxygen. So I want to talk about the carbon being released from the breaking down of glucose. This carbon will ultimately form carbon dioxide and release into the atmosphere. Like this. Okay? 6 marks, 6 sentences. 2, 2, 2. And I really think that it is good enough. Alright? It is very structured, it is very methodological. It doesn't make you feel like you are writing non-stop. Okay, so think about this. Alright? Now part B. Okay? The burning of fossil fuel and the destruction of the world forest I have already highlighted for you. There are 2 things, okay, are both increasing. Predict, which is the first command word, and then explain the effects of these increases on the carbon cycle. Okay, now both of this, right, will cause an overall increase in the carbon dioxide in the atmosphere. So the predict part is this one. Okay, now the explain part, right, has to be, of course, is explained, right? So the first thing that I need you to do, right, is to learn how to paraphrase. And many of you don't do that. You just type down the whole thing. You just write down the whole thing on burning of fossil fuel. Burning of fossil fuel, right, the process is known as combustion. So learn how to paraphrase, please. Okay? Because when you combust something, when you burn something, you release carbon dioxide into the air. So this is tallied with the final prediction. So this is the explanation for burning of fossil fuel. Okay, for the destruction of forests, right, you can elaborate more because it's about photosynthesis. So when forests are destroyed, right, there are less trees to carry out less photosynthesis. So I want to see less trees, answer directly, okay, and then less photosynthesis. And because it is less photosynthesis, less CO2 is absorbed. So over here, less CO2 is absorbed. Less, and less. Okay? So answer directly. Don't just regurgitate the whole thing out. I am looking for a more specific form of an answer. And this is 4 marks. You can easily hit 5 or 6 points. Okay, from this. Alright? But what I want to talk about, right, for this question, right, is that many of you say that the destruction of the world forest, right, actually leads to increase in CO2. Okay, now this is actually not true, okay? When I undergo deforestation, I am still locking the carbon in the trees. But this time they are dead. Okay, I haven't burned them yet. So if I don't burn them, right, I will not release CO2 into the air. So many of you wrote that, and I underlined, and I say not true. Okay, so this is something that is you need to write properly, and you need to think deeper. Okay, but deforestation does not lead to a immediate increase in CO2. It means that less CO2 is absorbed. It doesn't mean that there is more CO2 release. Okay, so please take note, and this is something that I feel that is has to be addressed. Okay, hence the long nagging session for part B. All right. Now question 2, right, is actually a science biology FRQ. Okay, and it's in November 2015. Even though it sounds like it's very far away, but the current trend right now is to give you data questions. Okay, so let me talk about a little bit about this. And the answers is actually a lot, okay, because I already went through in class, right, and I told you that there is a lot of answers. But from this data, right, you can see, you can argue from two things, okay? You can argue from the overall trend. Please always answer according to trend, because that's what the question is asking about. From 1950 to 2000, there is an increase from 3 billion to about 5.8 billion. Okay, around there lah. Alright, 5.8. So talk about the trend. Then you can talk about the manipulation. So you can say that you can mention from 3 to 5.8 billion, and then you can comma increase in 2.8 billion. Okay, so please don't manipulate straight away. Always describe the trend first. Alright, so this is the first general trend that you can describe. But because this bar chart, right, has so many different areas, right, you can actually talk about them from an individual point of view. Okay, so you can see Asia, right, there is an increase. So you can talk about Asia. You can see, right, Africa. Okay, Africa, there is an increase. So you can talk about the increase in Africa. However, for Europe and USA, you don't really see an increase. In fact, for Europe, right, you see a decrease. For USA, right, you can see that it's generally the same. Okay? For Latin America, you can see the increase as well. So you can go into every single one of them. You can talk about the general idea, and you can talk about the specific continents. Okay? And because of this, right, there are so many answers. Okay? So describe the trend, which is, I think this is a 5-mark question, I can't remember. So the describe part, right, got so many things to talk about. Okay? And these are my suggested answer for describe. You don't have to write all. And there is a second question in this question, which is to predict how the world population is likely to change in the next 50 years. Now the trend is an exponential increase, and so the population will all increase in the next 50 years, more or less. Okay? You need to just write one, I think. But over here, right, 4 marks is good enough. Okay? So again, right, it is about trying to answer them structurally. Don't write so many things, right, to confuse the marker. Okay, so break it down into 2 parts, and you should be able to get as many marks as possible. If you keep writing in a flurry, right, you probably will not have any idea on the organization. So yeah, this kind of question needs planning. Okay, final question for this particular question is, again, describe and explain the effects on future changes to the world population. Now this is indirectly linked to A, which means increase lah. Okay, so describe, right, the effects on future changes to world population and explain, but got 2 contexts. One is local and 2 is global. This is a very subtle clue, and most people will miss it. Okay, because the explanation for local and global, right, is you can actually explain them in 2 different ways. Okay, you can see, right, for local, you can think about it from a smaller point of view, from a small area point of view, like a country or continent. So you can talk about greater demand for food or deforestation for agriculture. Okay, you can talk about communities needing more housing, and deforestation is causing them to build to cutting down more trees to build more houses because they need the materials as well and the land. You can talk about industrialization because industrialization is still, like a country-based thingy. So to me, right, these 3 arguments, right, falls under local. Okay? Again, the strategy is to split them up. The global one, right, you can talk about something that is, that you can use a bigger term like deforestation in the world. Okay, global warming. Okay, you can talk about the atmosphere, carbon cycle. You can talk about pollution. You can talk about, loss of habitat, loss of biodiversity. You can see that over here, right, the explanation is more of a bigger scale. And because it is 5 marks, right, you are actually giving the marker 10 points, which is more than enough. But the whole idea is to help you to structure your thinking. And hence the reason why I'm giving this particular worksheet, right? I'm recording this video to explain to you in greater detail, just in case you cannot catch it in class. Okay? So try again. Look at it from a different point of view. Don't always just regurgitate what is in your head. Okay? Try to plan, and maybe you'll look at a question differently. Alright? That's it. Okay? Thank you. Bye bye.